Hey, everybody, welcome to the Unraveler Show. My special guest tonight, Troy Stoeber. Although, unfortunately, we're having a lot of audio issues, as you can tell with the crackling if you're hearing that right now. Fortunately, Troy made up for it by showing up in a tuxedo. So he looks great, even though he sounds horrible. But we are hoping to fix that here at some point. He's got somebody on his end, a friend Kyle, who's really trying to diagnose this and figure it out. So we needed to start the show because you're here and you're waiting, and I wanted to make sure you knew what was going on, that we weren't just like not showing up tonight. So I don't know what we are going to do, whether we are going to be able to have this show if we can fix this, or if we're going to have to postpone it. Either way, it's going to be what it's going to be, but we're trying to fix it right now. That sounds like the crackling is maybe getting up and it's coming back again. So yeah, we're not really sure what's going on. Troy, if you, I can hear you when you talk. It's just you got all that crackling and it's very obnoxious. So we're not going to try to do a whole show like that unless we can get it fixed. But if you are here again, I apologize for this crackling. I am going to mute him for a moment, just to save all of our ears from that. Tonight we are. Troy is a doctor in pediatrics and has a lot of knowledge and experience dealing with children, especially with trauma from religion. Troy has a religious background from Christianity, much like I do. His background and my background are very similar. And so we've got so many things that we want to talk about, dealing with things that are related to my book and then his science and in relation to his medical studies. He is back right now. I'm going to unmute him and see if we got lucky. Nope, we are still dealing with that crackling. This is... Sorry, everybody, for that. I don't know. As long as you're there and we're trying to fix it, we're going to keep the mic on to see if we can get rid of it. But
don't worry. People don't want to listen to me anyway. They want to listen to what you have to say.
Yeah, and I can barely hear you, Troy. Now your mic is so soft. We have actually tried a few mics. So we were behind the scenes dealing with this for about 20 minutes now. And so we were still trying to deal with it. And folks, I am really sorry. If anybody has any ideas on how to fix this and they've never seen it happen, feel free to chat, throw your comments in, because we would love to have. Okay, we're gonna try this.
Yeah, there we go.
Oh, all right. I guess we're going this way.
We're going with the phone. So we're in like this fancy schmancy studio, Alan.
Yeah.
This is as fancy as it gets, apparently. So I'm like on all kinds of videos all around me in a super high-tech sound system. We are going with my phone. So this is the Are you getting feedback right now?
Nope, you're all right.
Okay, cool. Well,
so I guess this is what we're doing then. Well, then we're here. Everybody, welcome to the Unraveler Show with myself, Alan, your host, and my new friend, Dr. Stoeber, from the YouTube channel Deepest Hell. What's that?
Yeah, I appreciate your patience. I was trying to get it all fancy, and we went with the Apple iPhone. That's what we got going today. So if you can hear me, that's great. If you
can hear you, and you look fancy, so that if that helps.
This is just to let you know, I was trying to figure out if I want to go with tuxedos as like a brand, or develop some kind of a moniker or something. But this is a European cut tuxedo with a mandarin collar and a button cover. So this is the first time I've pulled this thing out of the closet. I guess you could say I'm addicted to formal wear. So
nice. Well, you've chosen the right show to dress up for. We are. This is going to be a lot of fun. So yes, and hopefully our guests come back. We had about 7 of them in the room, and then they all just left. We were dealing with all that. So let's hope we can pull them back up again. But anyway, Troy, this is going to be a great conversation. I'm excited. This is something that I've been looking forward to. I love your channel. I think it's really awesome. The video I watched, the one on circumcision, bro. That was incredible. I was like, what? Like, anyway, some really good stuff. I'm also excited about checking out the one, not your mother's advice or whatever it's called.
Yeah,
that looks really interesting.
That's really good for parenting. So like the best one for atheist activism is definitely The Deepest Hell. And that whole label kind of came up when I was trying to do a response book. So a lot of times on YouTube, we have producers and content creators creating response videos to things that they find online that they're really compelling and interesting, and they want to make a response to it. Well, I wanted to make a response book. And so there is a book called The Deepest Well by a doctor. She's a pediatrician, just like me. Her name is Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris. And she didn't do the original research, and I didn't do the original research either. But the two of us have kind of taken on the role of champion. We're kind of promoting this research because of the implications of the results of the research. And so basically, Nadine Burke-Harris was very um, fascinated. She was very struck by the results of the adverse childhood event study. So, what we know is that childhood trauma goes on to cause untold medical problems in adults. And so, the more it's additive, so the more trauma you have as a child, the worse your adult outcomes for health are. And so it's a pretty simple correlation, but there is one big traumatic impact that got a free pass on that piece of research, and that was religious trauma. And it's a real thing, Alan. I'm here to promote it. I'm here to talk about it. Those adverse childhood events that they were talking about had to do with things like child abuse, child neglect, things that are obvious that adults would think of to say that caused child trauma. But if you actually ask the kids, they would probably tell you a very different story. And at the end of the day, it's all the same physiology. At the end of the day, it's the religious trauma that causes harm. That's why I'm here. So my book is called The Deepest Hell. It's a takeoff of The Deepest Well. So I'm promoting the ACEs study also, but I'm kind of focusing on the parity of the physiology. In other words, I think it's the same thing. It's the same process, and it causes the same negative outcomes. It's just that we're not giving religion a free pass. So I don't think it should get a free pass. Maybe some people do, and maybe some people will just kind of argue with me and say, no, there's no such thing as religious trauma. But in my book, it's a big problem, and it causes children harm. And as a result, I'm trying to make people aware of it.
I'm grateful for that, as am I as well. And I think that's one of the areas where we merge for sure. In the material I'm writing in the book, and then the material you're working on. Of course, you're coming from a very medical perspective, and actually having scientific backing to demonstrate the things, because you're in that field and you see it happening.
Well, and the other, well, there's a few aspects, and you already mentioned circumcision being one of them. I mentioned specifically childhood religious trauma, but then there's an epistemology angle. Like the very first thing I said about doing is just challenging religious apologetics. This is a self-inflicted wound. We don't need to be harming kids for something that doesn't really exist or that there's no evidence for. All we're doing is just causing, unnecessary stress and harm and anxiety on kids. So if it was real, that would be one thing. But it is very clear to me after some significant study. My deconversion story is it's kind of interesting. I've actually said it a few times on some YouTube channels, but ultimately, for over 50 years, I was a Christian. I was a card-carrying Catholic Christian, and so then, probably just about 3 years ago or so, I deconverted, and ever since then, I've been very active in the anti-theist, camp. I feel like if there is science, we should be following it. And if the science says that it's harmful, we should be heeding it.
I agree, and I'm with you. I'm not only an atheist, but I'm also an anti-theist. I totally agree with you. I've seen it do more damage than good. So let's talk some specific. Let's go back and let's discuss this as apologetics. Let's start there, because you make a good point. If there is no good reason to be teaching this to kids and it's harming children, then why are we doing it? And I think that's a valid point. I deal quite extensively in my book. Chapter 10 is the longest chapter in my book, and necessarily so, because it deals with every possible apologetic method under the sun. And if somebody comes up and they're like, no, you missed one, I guarantee you it fits under one of these categories somewhere in some small way, because I've dealt with exhaustively,
Yep.
ad nauseum. It's dealt with. I've tried to cover every little detail and every nuance as I possibly could. I've researched every single possible method. So whatever. I mean, there may be something. If there is, please let me know, because I'll gladly add it. It'll probably be a small paragraph, because I doubt that it's like some gigantic, surprising argument I've never heard of.
I keep like going back to something like the Atheist Experience with Matt Dillahunty. I feel like somewhere in the first 20 years of him hosting that program, somebody somewhere, if they had anything of value or anything relevant or anything that was conclusive or anything that held water and was solid, valid, and sound, I think it would have come up by now. But
for sure.
I mean, my attitude toward apologetics ever since my deconversion has really gradually but irreversibly gone down, 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 and down. There is no apologist I can't fathom an apologist being honest, and that's all there is to it. I mean, it is dishonesty, and it's deplorable. It is it's a crutch. It's a lifeline for people who are credulous. And I appreciate that there is cognitive dissonance and people need relief from it. I mean, I can physiologically understand, like it's like an addiction. Theism is an addiction. And so if you go to try to suddenly change your mind on this stuff, it causes cognitive dissonance after cognitive dissonance after more cognitive dissonance, and eventually it becomes easier to believe the truth rather than to keep lying to yourself, because it is exhausting, Alan. It's exhausting to do the song and dance and do the basket weaving and do the gymnastics, the mental tricks that you have to tell yourself. They're exhausting. And so I think I wish there were more instances of apologetics where the apologist was not dishonest, where they were being honest. And every once in a while I find that and I take note of it, and it usually ends up at the end where it's obvious and clear that they're being dishonest and that there's no rational justification for their belief. And then at that point they just kind of throw in the towel and they're like, oh, it's faith anyway. Or
So when you talk about this, the way you are and being dishonest and everything, I agree. But I want to clarify, at least from my perspective and for the viewers, at least, just to see where I'm coming from on this. So I begin with the notion that Christians are brainwashed to believe what they believe, and so that's what my book is about. And so I think that brainwashing is what causes the addiction. It creates a void that says, hey, I need this God, because without him, I'm nothing. Yeah. I'm a sinner. I have an emptiness. And so it creates this feeling that you need this something. And so you become addicted to God because you can't live without him, because he's the only thing that can fill this void that was created by the brainwashing. So it's this big, giant monster of a thing that just, we don't even realize is happening to us. And this becomes important, especially when it comes to kids. And I'm going to get there in a second. So when apologists argue, they're already starting with the conclusion that God exists. They don't think, they think they're starting with a premise and looking for a conclusion and then saying, God must be the answer. That's not what's happening. God's the answer no matter what. And then you retrace backwards and you try to find the premise and you create it. So what's ended up happening is the arguments, the facts, the evidence, quote unquote, that they think they have is simply evidence or facts that are consistent with their proposition that God exists. It is not evidence that substantiates that proposition. It's like the game Clue. You ever play the game Clue when you were younger? And you get down to like, it's like one of three people, and you're just so anxious to win that you just take a guess. And sometimes you get right and sometimes you get wrong. The goal is to wait until you know with 100% certainty which one it is, with which weapon in which room, right? But you guess at the end. And so that's kind of what apologetics does, is says, hey, look at all this evidence and it must be God. Well, no, it could be God. It could also be the flying spaghetti monster. It could also be what science says it is. It could also be a Barbie in the sky. It could be a million different possibilities to just say God, because that's what you've already believed before you looked for it, is the guess that you're doing, like you do in Clue. And so much better to go with the science, like you're saying, because that actually has substantive evidence that is rooted in the natural world in which we actually live and can test these propositions, which God cannot be tested, never has been able to be, and we have no way of knowing. So what ends up happening then is, because we're doing that, we're creating this addiction in kids. And of course, children aren't able to think the way a 50-year-old apologist that has been through seminary education or whatever, to be able to produce all these arguments and evidences that appear to be a proof of God. They just trust the professionals, and the addiction's been created in them. And so now, like John Bowlby, the British philosopher, said, or psychologist said, he came up with attachment theory. And so children learn to be attached to their caregivers, to those who are saving them or protecting them. And when they become addicted to God, they think they need him to protect them, and they get stuck in this pattern, and they just trust that there's evidence for it. And it becomes a psychological trauma, because what the real problem is, they're the problem. They have an issue. They're a sinner, and they need this God. Anyway, so that's how I tied it on again. So I don't think it's a dishonesty like they're just genuinely thinking, I'm going to lie today. I think they think this is proof, and it isn't. And it's deceptive, because when you point it out, they can't let it go.
We're going to agree to disagree, because
okay, all right.
If you point it out, everyone should agree. Like it's. I find it to be offensive. I find it to be. I mean, it used to be that I would be made to feel a certain way when I was a Christian, and I would be made to feel terrible about myself, like just worthless and undeserving, and you just name it. It devastated my psyche my entire whole life. And now when an apologist will say, like, if you present them their fallacy, or you point out the holes in their argument, they won't accept that. And that's where it's a problem. Like, if you're just not going to accept rationality, and you're not going to accept arguments, and you're not going to if you're going to resolve to commit fallacies, then why even have apologetics in the first place? The only reason I can think of is to give a believer somewhat of a space to hold that belief, even though it's clearly not a true thing. And just to kind of close the loop on what you were saying about childhood indoctrination, when you present right from birth this one special pleading, and it kind of sneaks in the back door right at the very beginning, and you never really notice that it's there. And so that's where that credulity comes in. You're always willing to make an exception, and you don't even realize you're making an exception.
That's the point I was making. That's what I mean. Like, I don't think they have a choice but to be deceptive, and to make stuff up, and to pretend like you're not making a valid point. The brainwashing is so deep. Like, let me tell you, like, when I was a Christian, dude, I can tell you that I was more than willing to think outside the box always, which is why ultimately I ended up as an atheist, because I kept pushing and pushing, and eventually I just ran out of excuses. But for the longest time, I would hold to the presuppositional view, and I'd be like, the reason you don't believe is because you're just suppressing the truth and unrighteousness, right? Like, you don't realize how nonsensical what you're saying is. So I think there are a lot of apologists that are intentionally being deceptive, because I think they do know, and I think they're just out to make a quick buck. And so I have no doubt that happens, but I'm not convinced every apologist thinks like. I think some of them are just so brainwashed they can't see it any other way. You know what I'm saying? Like, but I do think, like, what we're doing now, I think there's plenty more.
I see apologists in debate formats, or I see them on YouTube, and their arguments are deconstructed and they're exposed. It doesn't seem to faze them. They just keep going, and that's why I say I feel like they're just intentionally lying. I feel like they're intentionally being dishonest, and maybe I'm not giving myself enough credit. This is going to sound so narcissistic, Alan. But I mean, sometimes I just wonder, again, as you recall, I told you I was really low on self-esteem for the vast majority of my life, just because of the way Christianity broke me down and made me so ashamed of myself, just guilt, pain. Like I was scared shitless. I would walk around with like eyeballs bugging out of my head. I was completely limbic. I was always in the fight or flight response. That's of course the physiology that I try to educate people on, and I try to advocate for. But at the end of the day, I was helpless. I mean, there's no way to make sense out of that. Like when you don't have access to the faculties that you need to do to make critical thinking when you're always walking around just with this burden on your shoulders. It's just it's too much.
And that is such a potent comment, because I think that is one of the primary reasons why so many believers, even apologists, can't seem to digest the fallacy in their thinking. Because as long as you are a no good sinner and you have embedded in you this fear of being eternally punished, abandoning God is the scariest thing you can do, because if you do that, you're definitely going to that horrible place that you're afraid of going to. So it's a trap. And so you're almost tricked into not being able to think correctly, because you're so emotionally distraught with trauma that the very thought of losing God is just a stiff arm. There's no way you're going to talk me into that.
That sadly, I think it's a trap, but it's best set when the recipient is the most vulnerable, and that's when they're a child. I mean,
Yes.
If you just put it on the child right away, all through their life, there is a special pleading that happens, and they become absolutely oblivious to it. I mean, now I can't. It's hard for me to imagine. In fact, I feel a little bit ashamed that I was believing that there's no. Oh, Alan. Okay. Anyway, you know what I'm trying to communicate. I just there's no logical explanation for what was going on there. I was brainwashed, and I was indoctrinated as a child, and it took me 50 years, 51 years to get out of it. And I tell this during my deconstruction story, but for me, it was like just little paper cuts. I finally got out of the echo chamber. I grew up. I got out on my own. I started kind of experiencing other people, other cultures, other places. I got more and more education. And I tell you what, at some point, the light bulb goes on. And therapists who are trying to unbrainwash people deal with this all the time. Whether you're quitting smoking, whether you're quitting Christianity, whether you're quitting really any kind of habit, they'll keep using logic and reassurance and truth. And eventually, sometimes it's the fourth time, sometimes it's the 80th time. Nobody really knows why, but boom, the light bulb goes on. And when that happens, oh, it changes your life. It changed my life. So,
yeah, no, and that was the only point I was wanting to make regarding the dishonesty. Because I agree with you totally in a lot of cases, but in cases like you and me, I can tell you for 40 years, people were telling me stuff, and I read and I wasn't being dishonest. I couldn't see it because I was so embedded in the fact that God was just real. Because man, that was putting me from my birth, man. Like my mom was practically teaching me about God in the stomach. You know what I'm saying? So like, I didn't have a chance. I mean, I
well,
was groomed to be a pastor. I didn't know what else to do with my life, because the only thing I was allowed to really believe was God. And that evolution stuff at school, don't pay attention to that. Those are just evil, scientists just trying to take you away from God, as if the reason for science existence is to try to get rid of God, which has nothing to do with science. But that's the way we're taught.
is that child abuse?
Oh, yeah, it's totally child abuse, not intentional. I don't think it's intentional child abuse.
I mean, the thing is, it has the same effect. So, I mean, if it's trauma, it's trauma. And I've talked to people about this before. I mean, clearly it's trauma. So either you're just going to excuse certain types of trauma, or you're going to just take a stand and say, no, you know what? All trauma is bad and it has negative impacts. We're not going to stand for it. And that's where I'm coming from in terms of being an advocate for children. And I just try to try to frame the brainwashing into sort of a physiologic explanation, because for some people that makes a little more sense. In other words, um, you may have heard of like neuroplasticity, or just the way the body kind of adjusts to deal with trauma. It develops some unhealthy coping mechanisms, but it's always there, and it gives you a little bit of relief from the cognitive dissonance that would otherwise be present. So, I mean, just over and over and over, unseen. It's never examined, and I think you're exactly right. I would call it brainwashing. I
It's
refer.
absolutely brainwashing. Yeah, and once that brainwashing becomes an addiction, you know how hard it is to get somebody free of that brainwashing. Like the addiction isn't the real problem; it's the brainwashing that makes you think you need this thing that you think you have, which isn't even something you need to begin with. But it's just so the only way to stop thinking you need this thing is to get rid of the brainwashing. Like, it is an absolutely disgusting system, and it happens in all sorts of addictions, not just Christianity or religion in general. But the problem with religion is most people don't even realize that it's a negative addiction. Sure, Christians will walk around all the time being like, I'm addicted to Jesus, like it's some proud thing to be. But it's not. Like, since when is an addiction something to be proud of in any way, shape, or form? An addiction by nature is something that controls you. And ironically, in the Bible, it's told to have self-control. And yet you're walking around saying, this is my addiction. God controls me. That's not self-control. That's the opposite of it.
No.
Just doesn't add up. So let's talk specifics, right? Let's talk specifics. So let's go to childhood here, and let's see some of the ways that this unfolds and the dangers that having an upbringing like this causes upon children. And I specifically want you to share maybe examples you've seen in your field and how these things play out. So um, children are raised in church, that are young, and they're raised in a Christian home. One of the things that my mom loves to post, these memes. I see these memes all the time. And the one that I saw not too long ago, the best and most important thing you can do for your child is raise them in the Lord. And I'm like, that's the worst thing you could do, because you're literally just teaching them only one thing. You're brainwashing them to live in this system, and you're not giving them the opportunity to actually think for themselves. You are trapping them for life. Speak to that.
Yeah, no. So, in fact, it is the exact opposite of what I recommend for all kids and for all families. I don't have a specific physiologic reason, although I sometimes like to present those to people. What I do is I go with what Dr. Amy King says. She's a leading national child psychologist, and what she says the best thing you can do for kids is to love them unconditionally. I'm going to say it again because I think it's really important, Alan. The best thing you can do for any child is to love them unconditionally. That gives them the validation, that gives them the strength, that gives them the things that they need in their life to overcome difficulty and become more of a growth mindset, more of a resourceful citizen, more of an empathic citizen, somebody who can put themselves in other people's shoes. Otherwise, if you go with certain types of religion, including Christianity, there is one enormous exception, and that is if you don't believe what we're telling you you should believe. Even if it doesn't make sense, there's even more pressure to allow yourself to be brainwashed so that you don't even have to really worry about what the parts of the religion that don't make any sense. But there are if you're talking about practical impacts, kids can become very, very anxious. They can become ambivalent. They can have problems with like their stomach. They can have problems with their executive functioning. They can develop bad habits. They can develop addictions. Everything like is a self-medication process to deal with this one very, very important condition that's put on the kids. Are you doing it right? Are you saved? Are you going to earn eternal life? Are you going to believe the things that we're telling you to believe, despite the fact that after a while, as you grow up, you don't have the same echo chamber. You can't control them their entire life. They start to read other things, and they start to meet other people, and they start to listen to other things, like the Deepest Hell podcast. And when that happens, they don't have a frame of reference, a strong foundation to understand that, this putting a condition on the love that I get is the absolute worst thing you can do, Alan. That's the worst thing you can do for a child. The best thing you can do is love them unconditionally, basically the opposite of what religion does.
Yeah, I love that. I've heard other thoughts on things to do with kids. Like, one of the things I heard I thought was awesome. Your job as a parent is to teach them how to not need you anymore. I love that. And if you're doing that, you should also be teaching them how not to need some God that doesn't even exist at all. Like, if you can't demonstrate that this God exists, then why are you telling them to depend on this God? It's so frustrating. And especially, and let's be honest, most parents raising their kids in the Lord aren't apologists. They don't even know what the arguments are for God. They don't even know there are arguments, God. They don't even think about it. They never even ponder. What's that?
There's no need to think about it. That's the way it's always.
Yeah, there's nothing even there. So it's an absurdity. And another thing that I think is important is and I wish more parents realize this, and I wish that I was more raised like this. Somehow I broke free of the shell and actually became more like this. But it's more important why you think than what you think. You need to learn how to explain what you're thinking, because just because you have an idea doesn't mean that the idea is right. You have to be able to demonstrate things. That's what I love about the scientific method. It's peer reviewed, and you have to demonstrate it. And even when they make mistakes, they correct it and they move on. And science has made mistakes all the time, and that's all part of it. You grow, you learn, and you make changes. You have to be willing to change. You have to be willing to try to prove yourself wrong on a regular basis so that you can know what is correct. The problem with Christianity is God's word has never changed in 2,000 years. I've never changed I'm just going to stay sturdy on God's word. It never changes. If it never changes, then it's not growing. But of course, supposedly God knows everything. And yet the irony is God, promotes slavery in the old covenant. It's like, really?
So at some point, I advocate for something called child level scrutiny. Like, just ask simple questions, because once you get to a certain point and you're out of the echo chamber and you're not subject to the same brainwashing that you've always been subjected to, all it takes is real simple, real straightforward, real obvious. That's all it takes. Like, as soon as you start asking questions, the apologists, the preachers, whoever, the believers, start to sweat. They start to sweat, and they will come up with some conversation stopper. What is ours is not to question, or God works in mysterious ways. Those are the conversation stoppers that absolutely squelch budding curiosity. I don't think you could be more loving in this world than to be curious about things, and to be compassionate about things. But yeah, so I think we're on the same page with this. You want to, after a certain time, when the answers don't add up, some people are going to start changing their mind. And that's the point, Alan, where I don't know exactly how it comes about for everybody, because sometimes when you have conversations with theists, it's like trying to, pin down a Mexican jumping bean. Like, you'll start to make a point, and then they'll just completely abandon that point because they realize that it's a dead end, and they'll bring something else completely unrelated. And then they'll get you to chase them over there, and then they'll kind of toy with you for a little while and make it sound like they're doing something important, realize that you're onto their game yet again, and then they'll bring up something completely different. Yep. So it's so difficult, and their motivation is not truth. Their motivation is, at all costs, defend the belief that I have. I can't blame them. I've heard stories of kids, going around constantly worried about the rapture. I've heard kids constantly going around worrying about, did they obey their parents that day? I've heard of kids like me, for example, spending night after night alone in my head, knowing that God can read my mind, and just being completely ashamed of myself, completely guilt ridden. I mean, it's crippling, and it's hard to explain to people how bad it really is if they're motivated to completely ignore it.
Yeah, no, and the parallels with smoking are mind blowing to me. I used to be a real heavy smoker, so I
Yep.
use that parallel the most in my
With
book and in my examples because I remember doing the exact same thing with that. Like all the warnings, all the bad reasons to smoke, I would just make excuses for all of them. I would just deny them. No, oh, well, you don't know what you're talking about. I feel better when I smoke, so it must be good for me. Whatever. You say the stupidest things, and so you keep letting up, and then of course, while you're doing it, you're just like, why am I doing this? This is horrible. But you can just keep doing it, and you don't even know you're doing. You don't even pay attention to the actual cigarette. You're either drinking something else or you're on your phone. You're not even really enjoying it. You don't even know you're doing it. It's the weirdest thing. There's no
Yep.
pleasure in it whatsoever. You just go through motions and do what you're supposed to do. Because without it, you start to shake because you have this void when you don't have it because you think you need it. That's Christianity in a nutshell. It's exactly what it is. Like it's incredible how it parallels. It's just absolutely incredible.
And sometimes you have to be open to what the evidence shows or where the truth leads you. The problem with going in with the answer means that everything that disagrees with what you already agree with is going to get disregarded, and only the steps that make sense in terms of what your final conclusion is going to be are going to be accepted. They're going to be considered. They're going to be emphasized. It's a completely myopic way of doing things. um, I I feel like some people are open. Like I was a scientist. Like when I went through college, I just loved biology. I was a biology major, and then I went on to get my medical degree. And I found that experimentation was a great way to find truth. And being able to change your mind when you're presented with new information was a huge asset to my career as a scientist and stuff. And then there's some people who I think if you keep addressing them and you keep you have to be patient, you're going to be empathetic. It gets hard to do sometimes, but yeah, then you might be able to help them to see the truth and help them change their mind. But oh boy, I always thought that the Tooth Fairy and Santa Claus. Hopefully, no kids are listening to this show. It's for adults, or leprechauns or fairies. I thought that those were so much simpler and easier. Then I could just dismiss those. I mean, I understand my parents were now I'm a big boy, but the one thing that kept going, that special pleading that just lasts your whole life, is religion. And so I just kept giving that an excuse, a free pass. I think when I started to realize the research suggested that it's harmful, and that it's not necessary, it's an unnecessary, self-inflicted wound that we're perpetrating on kids. That's really when I stood up and took notice. So I deconverted, and then I converted not just to atheism, but anti-theism, because I see it causing problems. And if it wasn't causing problems, I would be perfectly okay with it. Some people, don't really hold any responsibility or hold any ill will towards the rank and file believer who's sitting in the pew and singing their hymn and giving their tithe and all that stuff. But the problem is it's just not true, and it enables some of the more fundamentalist people who can do harm to people, who want to take away people's rights, who want to impose their will. They want to impose their religious beliefs on everyone else. That's a huge problem for me. And so I'm having a great time podcasting. I appreciate this conversation very much. It's been rewarding. Wow.
Yeah, no, it's great. So So one of the things that you had mentioned that triggered my mind. One of the things that I think religion, by and large, especially Christianity, and I can only speak to that because I grew up in that. One of the negative aspects it has on a lot of people, um, particularly men, I guess, maybe women too. I can't speak to that as much as men, but is sexuality.
Mhm.
Um, and now I know that that's such a trigger for the Christian because they, typically, see, there it is. I knew it was coming. That's the only reason you atheists want to be atheists is because of sex and all the debauchery in the world. Whatever. That's not the point here. It's not about wanting to have debauchery. The point is, it does negatively affect your sexuality in a lot of ways. One of them is depending on your circumcision and non-circumcision. That's a big deal. We'll get to that in a second. Um, but um, but just the mind fuck that it does to you, where you are not allowed to have sex until marriage. Now I know that that's loosened more over the years, and as new age Christianity or whatever, the hybrid Christianity is coming in more and more,
Yep.
it's like everybody's just making up their own rules and they're sleeping around anyway. But fine and good for you, and I'm glad, but that's not the Christianity I grew up with. And by and large, it's, if you're going to teach the purity of the Bible and you're going to be real strict on these words, porneia, stuff like that, it's a lot stricter than the modern Christianity is letting on to. But you weren't allowed to lust at all, looking at porn. God forbid you look at porn. But even that, just don't even have an evil thought. And if you do, you're giving your mind over to the devil, and just like the craziest stuff. And it really messes with you, because then you're like restrain, and then all of a sudden there's this one day that comes around and you say I do, and that night you're supposed to just flip a switch and be like, ta-da, and I'm just going to be really good at this. It just doesn't work like that, at least not from my experience and not from most of the people that I talk to. It's a really real bad situation. Go ahead, you speak to that now.
No, I fully agree with you. It seems like such an arbitrary thing. Like when I look back at it now that I'm out of the echo chamber and I'm an atheist activist, it just seems like the ancient goat herders just had sex on their mind, and they decided arbitrarily that it was going to be a problem, and they made up these rules. They're just arbitrary man-made rules. They have nothing to do with anything divine. I mean, that's just an arbitrary thing. But yet, because it's such a big deal, it causes a lot of anxiety. I mean, it's if you ask people, you know can you relax and communicate and enjoy sex, there's a lot of religious people who have major problems with that. I'm making an assertion. I don't have a lot of evidence right on at my fingertips, but I mean, I can admit that I had problems with that because it was the exact same thing. Like you said, suddenly you're married, and all of a sudden, boom, like you're supposed to like let go of all the anxiety and stress and guilt and all the things that have built up over the years, and all of a sudden everything's great. Now, these days, I don't have that problem at all. I, I'm I mean, once you get rid of the guilt and the stress and the anxiety, now you can have true intimacy. You can communicate. I mean, my sex life is completely different than it ever was before, and I find the whole emphasis on purity culture. I find the whole emphasis on just controlling people's sexuality just such an arbitrary thing. It's even more evidence that it's man-made. I mean, what does God have any interest in what we do in bed? Like, the God of the universe, like, this is a big vast universe. I just cannot comprehend why any measure of divinity has to do with our own human sexuality. I think that's a thing that we can figure out as a secular species, and we can figure out what harms people. We can figure out what is pleasurable for people. I think we can figure out that consent is really, 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 really important. I think we can put some measure of faith, and by that I mean confidence, in the experts who have studied this. And I mean, that information is there for us to help us. So scientifically, I think, sexuality can be studied and it can be learned from and it can be improved. I don't feel like, guilt or shame or anything that has anything to do with religion has any business in our human sexuality.
No, and I agree. But and maybe this is why God can't focus on all the kids that have leukemia in the hospitals, because he's too focused on our sex lives.
Yeah.
That apparently is more important.
In our head,
Um,
like I remember being a teenage boy and like all I thought about was sex, and therefore
oh my goodness,
that's
I
all I
can't
thought about.
believe you survived that. You sexaholic. You should have gone to hell for that.
Yeah, because I was human. I by default was guilty and just felt, I felt so bad. People don't even understand. It would take me a long time to understand or to explain the withering devastation that that kind of trauma has on young people.
Dude, I get it, man.
Traumatic.
It when I don't know about you. Like, it sounds like your experience was similar to mine. Every time I would have this lustful thought and give into it, oh my goodness, dude, for the next hour, I would be on my knees weeping and praying and asking God to forgive me for this awful thing. Like,
That's
I
so maladaptive.
deprived myself for so many years of something that is just a natural part of humanity. And I suppressed it because I was afraid some God was disappointed in me. That's traumatic, man.
It's so maladaptive. And the thing is, now you start finding ways to deal with that. And so sometimes porn addiction is a perfect example of that. Like it kind of is a workaround. It makes you feel guilty. Of course, I'm sure people, you know, are down on their knees every day, complaining and asking forgiveness and stuff, or perversions, or again, you become sort of obsessed with it for no particular reason. That's just an arbitrary cross that you have to bear. I don't I don't believe that. I don't think we should have people stressed out about simple biological things that we all should care about and understand and be empathetic about. And
Yes, no, I agree. Especially just for crying out loud, man. These things called sins of the mind. Like, holy cow. Like, it's not hurting anybody. Like, what is our deal? How did we get here? Like, how in the world did we get here where like Christians think that they can control you by telling you what you are and aren't allowed to think?
yeah, yeah,
And like, it's just
it's
mind blowing.
a tough
But
one,
then,
and because it never leaves. So um, this brings me to the biggest bear, and so yeah, I do have some great news for you, Alan. You don't have to buy my book now because I'm spilling all of my little secrets in the book right now. So just save yourself $14.99 and enjoy this conversation. But
and
there,
buy my book instead.
I love it. I love it. There's a concept of the biggest bear. So in her book, Nadine Burke Harris talks about childhood trauma, and she kind of uses an analogy, and I think it's a great analogy. It has to do with the bear. So if anything doesn't love you unconditionally, it would be the bear. It causes a great deal of stress and anxiety. If you now I take that back. So an American black bear is actually naturally afraid of humans. So you can actually just make some noise and chase after them, and they'll go running away, and that's no big deal. But now we're talking about grizzly bear. Okay, so for the sake of argument, we're gonna assume that Nadine Burke Harris was talking about a grizzly bear, which would cause the fight or flight response. Okay, we're talking about our eyes dilating, our blood pressure going up, our heart rate going up, our skeletal muscles preparing to flee. It's very, very stressful. And if you actually did encounter a bear, that's very functional because it would allow you to flee and seek shelter and get away and hopefully continue to live. The problem is if the bear never leaves. So if the bear never leaves, then you're stuck in that stress physiology and you have problem after problem developing in your life. And what the research suggests, this ACEs research, is that you contract long-term health negative outcomes. So you have more asthma, you have more stroke, you have more heart disease, you have diabetes, you have so many more medical problems from childhood stress. Well, what that is at its core is a perversion of something that was meant to help you. Okay, so fighting or flighting or freezing or fawning, those are things that were meant to help you get out of a jam and reproduce and survive, survive to reproduce. And so, at first, it's very functional, but when it never leaves, it causes trouble of the highest order. Okay, now what Nadine Burke Harris thinks is the biggest bear is a parent who is abusive or who is neglectful or whose primary priority in life is drugs or drug abuse or crime or whatever the case may be. It's not in the child's best interest, and that's a bear that never leaves. But actually, the bear that never leaves is the bear that lives inside your head. It's the religion that's always there. Like I would torture myself at night for hours on end. I would think about what hell was like and how miserable I would be. And I mean, it, again, words can't even describe the impact it had on me. And I think also words can't describe the impact deconversion had on me, because like the moment I realized it was all a complete lie, and that I was actually pretty damn amazing. Again, I don't want to sound narcissistic, but it's taken years and years and years of therapy just to get some basic respect for who I am out there. You know what I mean? Like, so at the end of the day, my point is that religion is the biggest bear. It's the thing that just never leaves. It's always on your mind. It's always in your head. It's always condemning you. It's always making you feel guilty. It's always making you feel shame. You're always afraid of going to hell. You're afraid of being left behind in the rapture. It is absolutely one of the most traumatic things you can experience. And I understand not everybody goes through that, but to leave that out and give it a free pass and say it doesn't affect your health and say that religion is good for you, no, I'm not gonna start. I'm not gonna. Nope.
Right. No, and I agree with you. Now let's talk for a second because you've nailed some of the biggies. Hell, afraid of the rapture, those things. I heard somebody, or I saw somebody make a post or a comment on the share that I did for this show, and they said that the causes trauma is teaching your kids hell. It's not teaching them about Jesus, which I contend with. I think that's not actually true. I think there's so many negatives to teaching about Jesus as well, and I want to shift into that now because I think that's by and large one of the reasons why I see Christians shifting into this hybrid Christian version is because they're trying to move away from what
Oh
they
yeah.
think are the harmful effects of Christianity. Oh, it's those horrible things. We don't believe those. We just love Jesus. So I want to shift that direction because I think there's plenty of harmful things that have nothing to do with hell or the rapture that are causing the same kinds of trauma. And these are some of the things that we don't often pay attention to in the Bible, and that I think we're doing to kids. For starters, I just want to, and I'll make this last comment, and you can piggyback off it if you want to, and then we'll shift into another thing. But the whole sex thing we talked about, one of the things that I find so strange is you're always taught that there's only one way to have sex, the proper way, God's way, and it's when you get married. Don't ever think about it. Don't ever lust after a person. That's all
Mhm.
evil, evil, evil. But most of all, don't you ever think about having any sort of like polygamous relation. It's got to be monogamous. That's the only way. It's the only true way. And the irony is, obviously, you set the boundaries with your own relationships. You don't need a God to tell you that. There's no rule on this. There's no like superior eternal being telling us how to have sex properly. It's like set it with your own partners, that's partner or partners or whatever, and you just abide by that. And whatever you agree to, that's your rule, and that's great. But that's for another day. But here's where I'm going with this. Don't you ever do that. But then suddenly you get married, and here you are in the bedroom, just you and your wife and God. And now you got God in the room watching you. He's a voyeur, and you're just like weirded out by this shit because
Right.
That was my thought. I was just like, this is really uncomfortable. I didn't know what to handle. How to handle that because I had such a devotion to God, and I really believed He was there all the time watching me. And then here I am for my first. I'm like, it was so awkward. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? Like that, and so you have this constant threesome with God. He's always in bed with you, and you're just like, you don't know what to do with that as a Christian after being taught this all year.
Child level scrutiny. Child level scrutiny. There's no creativity. There's no curiosity. There's no questioning. Simple thoughts like that are not even, they're not even possible when you're constantly stressed out and you're constantly under the threat of hell and you're constantly, I mean, those are simple, curious, very relevant questions. I mean, contrast that with science. Like, you want to be a kid. The best scientists are kids. The
Yeah.
best scientists are kids. They think anything's possible. They ask questions you never even thought of asking. So I mean, I know you're wrapping up the sex topic, but my I came to the same conclusion you did. I mean, there's just, it's an arbitrary focus, and it's an arbitrary, guilt, and it's an arbitrary stress on your life that you just do not need. I mean, adults in this great free country can do what they want as long as they're consenting and not harming anybody. I just, that makes, there's no reason for religion to even have the slight impact on that.
None whatsoever. And I mean, when I said leaving sexuality, I mean it's not like we can't come back to it. I mean, I could talk sex all night. Sex is a great
Yeah.
topic, but I mean, like even that whole facet I was talking about earlier, where in that moment you're supposed to flip the switch, and it's not even so much that, but like how this whole idea, and now especially as an atheist, knowing there isn't a God, it's like you're supposed to just suddenly have this compatibility with this person that you've never been able to
Yeah.
have this sexual encounter with, and just magically you have to hope that it's the right that we lost you, Dr. Stoeber, Troy, we lost you, man. There you are. Yes, I thought we lost you.
Somebody
What's that?
somebody called me.
Oh, somebody called you. Okay, I thought somebody like shut your phone off. Too much sex talk.
Sorry.
But yeah, I mean, and then I know of many relationships and marriage that just didn't work because of the compatibility issue,
Yeah.
and you could have figured this out beforehand.
I find that expecting marriages to work out is completely unrealistic if you don't do some basic things ahead of time to ensure compatibility. And I don't mean just like philosophical compatibility. I mean like everyday. I mean, I got remarried a few years ago, and my second wife and we get along so well. I mean, we spent a lot of time together, and we were, just completely um, on the same wavelength in terms of communication and stuff. And we were, it was just a completely different situation. I got practical reassurance that once the marriage thing happened, um, and it went off exactly like I suspected it would. It went off without a hitch, and nothing really changed other than we got rings on our finger, and now we can say we're married. But I mean, you can't do that if you're um, a, a, a religious person and you have impingement from your religion on things like your sex life, things on um, um, the matriarchy, or I should say the patriarchy, or who gets to make decisions, finances, all, just there's so much that goes into it.
So much.
I don't expect. I'm surprised things work out as well as they do. And furthermore, if let's say, to round it off, half of marriages fail. Of the ones that are successful, I don't know that there's a very high satisfaction rate, or a very high. I mean, just because you're married doesn't mean you're happy, and just because you're married doesn't mean everything's working well for you in your life. You might be stuck in a miserable marriage, but that might be your resolve as your cross to bear because of religion. I mean,
Yeah, well, first of all, there's a stigma associated with marriage that need not be, and in my opinion, I like marriage is a religious construct. It really is. I don't care. You want to get married, get married. Don't get married, don't get married. I see no reason to even have this structure. But like me and Ray, the only reason we would get married is if it benefited us from a financial
Yeah,
standpoint with the government. Right now, it would hurt us. So it's nonsensical to get married. Like it's just rings on a finger. We have no less commitments by not having the rings than we would if we did the rings. Marriage. What is marriage? It like
cares what everybody else thinks anyway.
even the Bible says, "Let your yes be yes and your no be no." I mean, like, what is the ring? I've already said yes. Like I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Like I don't need to add another yes to this. Like I did it. I'm good. Like it's just bizarre to me how we've created this, and then we just complicate things. That if it doesn't work out, now we got to go to the courthouse and we got to find a way to get divorced. Life's just easier if we just say, "Hey, we're either in or we're out." Like I don't know, but anyway, so we're kind of off topic a little bit because
But just remember, like we said, there's all this tension and all this stress and all this anxiety. And what I was saying physiologically is that doesn't allow you to be your best self. That doesn't allow you to communicate. It doesn't allow you to be patient. It doesn't allow you to understand things. It doesn't allow you to be empathetic. It doesn't allow you to have the tools that you need to have a good marriage. So yeah, I mean,
so this okay. So let's get it back on track then. I'm actually say that last thing because I don't can't quite hear you when you're talking and I'm talking.
I was just saying that's why I'm an anti-theist, because I think it causes problems.
Agreed. So all of this is so let's backtrack now. Let's go back to kids because that's what this topic's about. But all of this is instilled in children. That's what happens. And you carry that all the way through into your marriage. This is disastrous. Like this is all part of raising your kid in the Lord. This is what it does. Like it is not as good as you think it is. Like it's not healthy. In fact, if you think that you have to raise your kid in the Lord and teach them how to make sure that they never walk away from God and keep him forefront, you're not actually letting them make the decision. You're not actually giving them the mind to choose whether or not they want to follow God. They're just going to do it because you said so. That's not a good way to raise a kid. You're not teaching them to think.
It's worse than that. It's motivating them through negative reinforcement, and not just ordinary negative reinforcement, like you're gonna lose your phone for a week, or you're gonna be grounded, like burn in hell for all eternity. Like that, it's a mind. Oh, I mean, it is child abuse. I mean that telling somebody they're going to go to hell because they're disappointing somebody who doesn't even exist. That's that's just traumatic abuse. I don't know any other way to say it. Like I said, there are some times when these conversations happen that the words just escape me, because it's all about like how you feel in your heart and how you feel in your mind, and it's so passionate. Like I wish I could just have a long conversation with anybody who says, no, Troy Stoeber, you didn't have trauma. No, this was just something that you made up in your head, and God's loving, and God's merciful, and God's forgiving, and all these things. I mean, for every single uh, 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 Bible passage, you could find that give this benevolent, all-knowing, all-loving God some credence. There's just as many contradictory, uh, opposite um, passages that you could relate to, and it just depends on who you talk to and when you talk to them and how you want to feel, and it just causes ambivalence. Child level scrutiny here. If God really loved me, he wouldn't do this to me. if God was really caring about me and he had a really important message, the most important message that I could ever get, he would not just leave that to chance by some goat herders from 2,000 years ago who weren't literate, who lived in a certain place, and you know didn't have contact with everybody, didn't have cameras, and didn't have videos, and just figured I should interpret the text the correct way. There isn't a single Christian who I know who thinks everybody else is doing it right. They think they're probably the only one doing it right.
Yeah.
That's child level scrutiny.
Yeah. So I grew up believing in hell and the rapture, but I had shifted in my theology over the years. I wasn't one of these that said, "Oh, well, I just don't accept those verses." I always incorporated all of Scripture. Like I really believed the whole thing, but eventually came to study myself out of the belief of the rapture in hell from the text itself. I didn't think the Bible actually taught either of them, and they really don't. It's a made up construct. Primarily, at least the hell part started by the Catholic Church with Dante's Fire and Star, Dante's Inferno, or whatever. So it's popularized by that. So it's a nonsensical view that actually doesn't come from the Bible, but most people just buy it hook, line, and sinker because the word hell is in the Bible, which is a very, very bad translation of the Greek. A very bad translation. It should just literally be Gehenna. That's what it is. It's a place, not. It was a local place in Jerusalem. It's not a spiritual realm that you go to burn forever and ever. But neither here nor there. It's there. It's in the Bible. So people just believe it, and you can't convince them otherwise because it's embedded in them. And that fear, once it's there, it's really hard to let go of. Anyway, my point is, I studied myself out of that. So were I to be raising kids, I would not be raising them to believe in hell or the rapture. So I would still be causing trauma were I still a Christian raising kids, but it wouldn't be because of hell or the rapture.
Mm-hmm.
It would be simply because I was still teaching them that there was a void and that they were an awful, godless, worthless, useless piece of shit sinner that unless you turn to Jesus, you're going to live in eternal separation from God. And that's the end of you. And so that derogatory language, that degradation is what I think is the most damaging part of religion and Christianity in general, or particularly because and I know that the newer version of Christianity says, "Oh, we don't talk like that in our church. We give a positive message. We just want to love like Jesus. We want to live like Jesus." And I say, "Well, why do you need Jesus?" Well, because he teaches we need him to. Wait, you need him. See, you start to press a little bit, and you start to realize you still need him. And if you still need him, that means there's a void that says, "I'm not good enough without him." It's just if we say it more positively, it sounds better. Yep. And it doesn't sound like we're degrading people, but you still are. You're still messing with their heads psychologically without them even realizing it.
When you start to have the conversation with them, they cannot get you to those passages where God is loving and merciful and sent his son to be a sacrifice for all of your wickedness, and you don't deserve any of this, but you don't really have to worry because God has made a plan. He's so loving. He sent his son to take on your sins in your place. They cannot get you to those passages fast enough. That's like priority number one, because if you start down that road of you're worthless, you're nothing but oily discarded rags, you're completely worthy of love, but he loves you anyway. Those are some hard passages to hear. They're hard messages to hear, especially when you're a child. That is traumatizing. And my kids, I at the time I was still a believer and I sent them to church. Fortunately, they would come, after church. We had a pretty robust youth program. They would come with like crafts, and they would come with positive messages. And I don't think they were, scared shitless like I was. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't take a genius to figure out if you keep pounding those messages into kids, eventually it has a profound impact. They take that to heart. They believe they're worthless. They believe they're not worthy. They believe, they are nothing without God. They believe they have to appease God in all that they do, and when they fail, which they're sure to do, I know you mentioned that this wasn't perfectly necessary, but it's very effective to bring up hell and hellfire. I mean that's very highly motivating, and most people don't like to think about it. I know I didn't. I didn't ask for any of that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that by and large, most Christians start out with the hell and fire and brimstone and rapture stuff, and then eventually switch and shift their theology. And then they become convinced, oh, the reason I'm a Christian is I love Jesus. No, the reason you're a Christian is because you were afraid of hell of hell, and you chose the lesser of two evils, and so this is where you ended up, and now you convinced yourself that you love God. Like it's it's a whole mess. Um, but one of the things that we don't often shed light on when we are teaching children is what is actually taking place in the Bible with this God that they love, that we're teaching them to love. For example, you look in the law of the Old Testament where when a child was disobedient to their parents, you're supposed to stone them. That's how you purify the land. Okay,
Yeah.
fine. I mean, fine. Let's just say that God's so holy, he must eliminate these sinful kids. Fine. Kill him. Strike him dead with a lightning bolt for crying out loud. But stoning, this is the merciful God. So you're going to teach your children how merciful God is. Therefore, you can't go to these texts and say, now, child, let me also teach you how God chose to punish these children.
You,
Do you know
you
what stoning is? Like, holy cow, man.
you stay away from that. That is high priority to stay away from that. You need to subvert that and bury that. And I mean, I remember Dillahunty one time was going through his childhood Bible, and he would have stuff highlighted on either side of things about slavery or things about genocide. He'd have things that were highlighted that had nothing to do with um, you know harming kids or killing kids or stoning gay people. I mean, it would be just basically rainbows and butterflies. I don't think I do think that nowadays modern churches are aware of this and they know they cannot bring that stuff up. They have to focus on the positive aspects of things and the positive aspects of religion. And there are some positive aspects of religion. There's some wisdom in the Bible and there's some wonderful literature in the Bible. But it is should be appreciated for what it is, which is a literary work of art by man, and not some kind of inspired. I mean, there's no evidence that it's inspired by anything supernatural.
Right. No, for sure. And all the stories that we teach the kids, like we always have to leave out all the details that are going to be gruesome. So, like the flood, for example, it's a story, a wonderful story about God's rainbow. No, it's not a wonderful story about God's rainbow. It's a wonderful story about nothing. It's a horrid story about how God sent people to their useless and mindless death, with mothers drowning as they're holding their babies above the water, as they're weeping, hoping just to save their baby, and drowning babies and suffocating. This is what's going on in this story. But little kids don't have the ability to put all that together, and we keep it from them.
Yeah,
It's sick, man.
we see the pictures of the smiling giraffes, 2 by 2, and how all the animals paired
Yeah.
up. They march on to the ark, and it's a beautiful thing. I mean, it again, child level scrutiny. Eventually, this is another kind of another mantra that I got from psychologists, psychotherapists. They say keep doing what you're doing because eventually kids will figure it out. Well, if you keep focusing on the happy, two smiley animals that pair up and hop on the ark and they're smiling and you have these beautiful artistic things, like some people have it in their in their nursery, or they get books, children's books and stuff. That's really great, but eventually child level scrutiny takes over and adults are like, wait a minute, what happened to all the people and all the animals, and how did they feed the animals, and how did the animals get to where they were after the boat came to rest? And simple questions, that's all it takes. And eventually most adults, if they're not in the echo chamber and they don't have the fear of everlasting eternal damnation in their heart, if they're not brainwashed, or even if they are, sometimes they can kind of break free of it, because what the way you described it is completely different than what we tell kids and what we show kids and stuff.
No, you're absolutely right. We use the flannel boards because they're much prettier than the actual story. I, um, so you travel through this teaching and all these things you're telling the kids, and start to put it all together. And And the basic message is always, you just need to always give it to God. Just always trust God with everything. In all your ways, acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. Like, what we are teaching children is, don't think for yourself. Don't waste your life planning anything. Just trust God. Just
Yeah.
whatever he says. And in a lot of ways, this is the manipulation that we do to people that start to think that they actually can hear the voice of God,
Yeah.
because they have to. You're supposed to just wait on him to tell you what to do. So you got to figure out a way to hear his voice. So you start to pretend like you do, and then you make, you make your life based on that. And so all we're teaching children is how not to think, how not to make plans and to work
Yeah.
hard and to succeed, how not to self-soothe and deal with real life issues, how not to work through things when they're hard, and when trouble rolls your way. We don't teach kids how to work out things. We just
Right.
turn it over to God, and and we don't learn how to diagnose things properly. We don't know how to have proper relationships. We fail in good communication because we don't know how to express ourselves.
We don't
These are all the things that I ended up having issues with because of all this garbage. And I want you now to talk to about it, because you are dealing with kids every day that are coming to you with these issues.
Yeah, yeah. We don't have healthy coping mechanisms. If we
Yeah.
were exposed to some of this stuff, we would naturally develop a little bit of intestinal fortitude, a little bit of self-esteem, a little bit of assertiveness. We'd be a little more creative in how we problem solved. There would be so many more opportunities for success for kids as they develop critical thinking skills. It's just the exact opposite of what we want to teach them. And then we have the assholes. And by that, I mean the Matt Walsh and the who's that guy from the, oh, for goodness sakes, now I'm forgetting them all. There's basically, I was kind of referring to the crisis of masculinity. There is a lot of criticism of men in the church who are not leaders that don't take their families mantle and lead their family in the way that some Mark Driscoll, that was
Mark
one.
Driscoll, yes. Yeah, Mark Driscoll. And then there's Doug Wilson.
Yes, I mean, we could go on through a few of them, Shapiro, all those guys. So
Yeah.
the thing is, how do you expect men today to be successful and to do the so-called Christian leadership that is envisioned when they're broken down and just absolutely, made to feel, unworthy and powerless? That's a dichotomy that is very difficult to rectify. It's very difficult to um, expect somebody to suddenly get skills that they've never been trained for, that they've never been provided, they've never been given a basis for, they've never been given a model for. And so then, they get criticized quite a bit. Like, you and I, we have feelings. You and I, we have empathy. You and I assume positive intent. You and I are problem solvers. We have capacity to, center ourselves and, remain stable. But that's not the way it is with some men. Some men, some Christian men are just absolutely scared shitless. I don't know any other way to put it. It's a tragedy, and it started with childhood trauma.
Yeah. Um, and by the way, like, when you mentioned earlier about going through therapy, like I had to do the same thing. Like, it wasn't like I just came out of Christianity and ta-da, I was this perfect being, I'd like to think that, but that just wasn't the reality. I had to undo a lot of that garbage that made me think that I was worthless and useless, and I was insecure, and I like lost a lot of my natural um confidence
Yeah.
that I would have, because it left with me in Christianity. Because at least when I was a Christian, even though I was a worthless, useless sinner, as long as I banked my life on Jesus, I was as confident as I needed to be, because he was everything and I had everything. And therefore I was good enough, right? In Christ. Take Christ away. And now I'm like, oh my God, who am I? I was just this worthless person because I no longer had that thing that made me confident. Like, man, it
Those
was horrible.
those are conflicting messages that cause ambivalence. They cause confusion. They cause tremendous anxiety, and I see parts of the harm that was done to me by religion in other people, and I can recognize it. I know how it's going to manifest itself. It comes out in, I mean, if you ask any doctor about what anxiety does to boys, it comes out as aggression, it comes out as impatience, it comes out as violence. I mean, there's no other way to deal with it if you don't have any other tools. So anyway, I feel like that's a pretty straightforward thing. I when I hear the assholes and I hear them complaining and railing against masculinity and railing against the crisis of men in the church, I just think to myself, well, you kind of set this up. You kind of made it that. I don't know why you wouldn't build people up, build men and women up, build kids up, regard them, cherish them, look out for their well-being. It's not rocket science.
No, it's not. And unfortunately, when we're raised in a biblical matrix, we don't know how to deal with the real world. When I got out of Christianity, I started to actually um, enter the real world, like live in the world, in reality. I wasn't trapped anymore by the four walls of my church and my community that just kept me safe and made me feel good. Everything was happy there. And as long as I'm relating to people who think like me, life's fine because they all think the same, right? So everything's fine. But you put me in a real world where now you're free to think out here and everybody thinks themselves and everybody's trying to figure shit out. And my boss is a transvestite, which have no problem with now because I've learned how to love her and become accustomed to it and it's normal to me now because thanks to this opportunity, I've been able to experience what real people in life get to do. It's not a punishment. It's not a curse. It's just who they are. And it's wonderful and it's okay. But when I was a Christian, I was trained that that's just evil. And so my first encounter, I was just like, I didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
It was just so awkward. And it's a shame. Like, why do we have to be taught like that?
Terrible shame. And I consider it kind of like a filter. Like the brainwashing is a filter that you just see everything in the world through and you experience it that way. At the point where the veil is lifted and you can see everything clearly, it absolutely positively changes your life. It changes every aspect of your life. When you realize, oh my God, I've been traumatized. I've been, harmed. This is something that I should never have tolerated. This is just an unnecessary burden that my life has been, devastated by. Once you kind of look at the world in a new way and you experience it in a new way, it's so much more gratifying. You don't have that constant filter of stress. You don't have that constant, lingering guilt, that constant lingering, trauma that's been on you, and you can breathe easier. You can relax. You can enjoy the world. You can engage in the world on your own terms. You have so many more tools with which to rely on. And so out there in the real world, there are a lot of people who think they know what atheists look like, and they think they know what atheists talk about, and they think they know how bad atheists are. And what they're realizing today by watching this show is that some of the atheists out there are just the kindest, most thoughtful people you'll ever meet. They're intellectual. They care about other people. They develop empathy. And so eventually, I say keep doing what we're doing, because eventually the world will realize, okay, you know what? I've seen enough of this atheist now that I realize this is what I want to be like. This is who I want to accept. I went through life as a young person being taught things about people that were, it was criminal. It was child abuse. Like I met people that were different from me, and at first I was like, well, that's that's a bad thing. And I was taught messages about homosexuality and women, and it had nothing to do with anything true. But the truth eventually found me, or I guess you could say I found the truth. I found my way out of all that filter, and just it was there was one day, Alan, that was just like lifting the veil. Like the veil came off, and like my eyes were opened, and I was like, this is all just arbitrary. It's all made up. We don't have to, you know, time after time, the things that religion taught me about what reality was like was different. And eventually I just decided, you know what, I'm going to believe what's real now. I'm going to be a grown up and make decisions for myself. And it changed everything. It changed, you know, I'm a completely different person now than I was, certainly 10 years ago.
Yeah, I would say this. I'm completely different and the same, I suppose, in a lot of ways. Like I still have the same personality. I'm still friendly. I'm still goofy. None of that's changed. But I'm able to think freely now in a
Yeah.
lot of ways. I'm able to do things that I was never allowed to do before. Not because even some person was restricting me, but I was restricting myself because of beliefs that I had, and that some God was going to be mad at me for. And it's just or just disappointed even, or that I wasn't going to achieve my greatest joy because that's the best way God says to live. Like, and so I was completely living my life for a God from the Iron Age or whatever, that knows nothing about anything at all because he doesn't even exist. It's just weird, man. So now, yeah, I love science. Like like I said before, I never really studied science because it was just that's just a stupid scientist trying to pull me away from God. And now I'm just like, holy cow! I wish I'd have studied this my whole life.
I love
could have done something.
I love learning, Alan. I love changing my mind. I love discovering new things. I love expressing curiosity. I love using my imagination. Those are things that, I mean, were literally discouraged in me in my youth, and now as an adult, I'm just re-experiencing them for the first time, and it's so rewarding. It's so enjoyable. I mean, I enjoy my job. I enjoy my wife. I enjoy my life. I enjoy the air I breathe, like that little molecule that I just sucked into my lungs. I love that. I love that molecule. And people, I'm sure, will think that's just crazy and that's a joke, but it's not. It's not. I love this life. I mean, it's so rewarding. It's so every aspect of it is just something I want to savor.
It is, man. Me too. So, reasons not to teach your children about Jesus. Let's forget the hell or the rapture thing. But for those who are saying, well, no, but that's your problem, Gage. We need to teach about you. Listen,
Hey,
number one, one of the things so many people seem to forget when they're just focused on Jesus is that Jesus is Yahweh. He is the God of the Old Testament, the parts that you despise and say, oh, well, we don't believe that stuff. If you believe Jesus is God, you believe he condoned and endorsed that same stuff. So you
right.
can't just separate them and say, we're just following the New Testament Jesus. That's not possible because the New Testament Jesus is the Old Testament God. It's the same being, like at least according to the Bible. But let's just say you somehow disconnect them and you're one of well, I don't even believe he's God. He's just Jesus. I just love Jesus. All right. Let's see some problems. Jesus comes around, he starts teaching these things. You have heard that it was said, but I say to you. And what does he do? He takes all these problems with the old covenant law and all these things that were just expressions of it, like actually having adultery or actually stealing or actually killing somebody. And he says, but I say to you, the real problem is if you just think it. If you just hate somebody in your head, or if you covet, or if you lust after somebody, that's a sin. So what Jesus now does is he takes what real crime and real issues are and real like immoral acts that that potentially happen, and he translates them into our heads, and he says, now everything you do is evil. He takes everything and he condemns us completely and utterly so that we are 100% sitting here paralyzed saying, well, shit, everything that goes through my head is a fucking sin. This is what you're doing with your Jesus. This is what he does. He makes you nothing but an invalid.
And think about it from a kid's standpoint, right? Because like as an adult, at least you have some basic sense of what reality is. And as a kid, you're completely defenseless. Like you take this very concretely, you take it to heart. It's very real to you. You know, I wonder sometimes, because you've heard it said that Christians say atheists, still believe. They believe in their heart deep down. They definitely
Yeah.
believe. My thought is, as an atheist, Christians secretly believe in rationality and reasonableness. I mean, that doesn't even pass the sniff test, even child level scrutiny. So, like, I wonder sometimes, like, are there actually Christians out there who are like, this is complete BS? Like, what are we talking about? Like, that doesn't even that has no basis in reality. And I do hear religious people talk about this and be critical of it. And in fact, that's probably the reason there's like 4,000 different Christian denominations. Everybody disagrees about something, and it just, if that's kind of like, maybe I'm committing a fallacy, but when you have 4,000, denominations, it's a little bit of a clue that maybe that God doesn't exist, or if he does, he just doesn't care to bother to clear it up to make just one. And that's just in Christianity. That's not even counting all the different religions all around the world. I mean, a loving God who cared about us and wanted us to know this important message would simply not allow that to happen. So,
No, I agree. And Jason Folks just joined us. What's up, Jason? Great to have you, buddy. So yeah, uh, and I lost my train of thought because I just saw Jason pop out. And I was like, hey, I know where to
maybe
go
they
with
can
that.
questions. This is kind of cool. This is the first live stream I've ever done. And to be honest with you, it might be the last one I do at the studio, because my iPhone turned out to be the key piece of equipment that I needed. So I'm really happy to have and
Y'all see that? Jason's right. Hit that like button, or y'all will give us another denomination. It's too
nice,
funny, man.
nice.
Yeah, we should probably take some questions, but anyway, yes, I appreciated everything you were saying. It's just been a really good conversation. I hope people realize the damage that you're doing to children when you're teaching them this religion. And look, I know, as you were saying, that was the thought I was going to say, to piggyback on what you were explaining earlier. I know atheist Christians. Weird, honestly, super weird. But my bigger concern with, like, fine, you're an atheist and you just like being a part of Christianity. But my big concern is, if you see all the problems with Christianity and theism in general that made you actually become an atheist, why would you continue to support an organization and a religion that does this much damage? That's not helpful. Like, when people, like, I talk to people who when I talk in my book, I actually explain this too. When you're deconverting and you've deconverted and you're now an atheist or whatever, or even just not a Christian, the question is, well, can I keep going back to the church and being a part of it and helping them and serving? If you want to keep making Christians, but isn't that the whole reason you left? I mean, it's counterintuitive to go back and support a system that you just escaped, because all you're doing is help promulgate more Christians. Like, what are you doing? Like, the best thing we can do is watch this thing die so that we as humanists can rise. Like,
It's
that's what needs to happen.
I can't help but notice how meaningful and robust it is to hear conversations like this on like social media. I think these things have an impact. I think the advent of the internet and the way we communicate and the way we get information now, I mean, I think it's contributing to people questioning. Like, you you're more likely to get a little bit of the other side of the story. You know what I mean? Like, you're more likely to be able to Google something real quick, or you're more likely to be able to pull up a podcast that explains something, or listen to an opposing viewpoint. So
Absolutely. All right. Well, everybody, we're going to be taking questions now. As you're popping in those questions, make sure you give us one or two, especially if you want Troy to answer some while you have the opportunity. This is a doctor in pediatrics. Keep that in mind, because this is a great opportunity. So please throw them in there. And like you said, it doesn't do any live podcasts, so at least not currently. So this is a great chance. So go ahead and do that. While you're doing that, I just want to remind you that both Troy and I have our YouTube channels. You're already on mine, obviously. I also do one with a friend called man named Dustin. It's called Birds of a Feather. I encourage you to check that out. I don't think that one's in the link. I might want to throw that in there later. Troy has one called The Deepest Hell. That one is in the link. Make sure you click that and go subscribe. And you have two other ones that you produce.
Yeah, but those are not really relevant to what
okay.
I'm doing.
So we won't worry about them then.
Like I said, I only recently deconverted. And so, they were more for like, pediatric care, parenting, parenting advice, and just kind of, human interest and stuff, the local talk show. So those things are interesting and they're entertaining. But like, if your interest is atheist activism, then The Deepest Hell is for you. I do have a Facebook page that is a great resource. But yeah, if you go to my channel, I don't have very many subscribers, so I need more subscribers.
Go subscribe. Absolutely. That's how this stuff gets out there. We need subscribers, please. So subscribe to me if you don't already, because again, that helps me. Go to The Deepest Hell. Please subscribe to Troy, because obviously this man has an incredible mind and is very beneficial to our cause. So please, please, please help him out. Also, I don't have a link down there currently, but I need to get the link to where your book is being sold, The Deepest Hell. So we'll make, it's not out yet.
No, it's in the final stages of being produced. So, you can send me your next book and I'll give you a beautiful review for the cover, and I'll send you my book and you can give me a beautiful review for the cover. But yeah, I mean, all of the stuff that we're talking about is so critical, and these conversations are so important. And I get a lot of satisfaction about, kicking around these ideas and talking about them, because I want to be right. The truth means something to me. And so, if I'm not right, the first thing I want people to do is tell me how I'm wrong. I don't want people to lose their ever living mind. I don't want them to, burn the house down. I don't want them to throw eggs at me. I don't want them to, tarnish my name. All they really need to do is just tell me how what I'm saying is not right. Pretty simple.
Right on. Well, I'm looking forward to your book. So yes, when it's done, please let me have a look at it. I would love to read it, and
Will do.
give you a review. And of course, you have the link for my newest book coming out pretty soon, called called Unravelation: How Those of Faith Find Freedom. Very excited about releasing that. In the meantime, in the link below in the info, you can get my book that's available right now. It's the first edition. It's called How to Kill God the Easy Way. It's really good, but it apparently a lot of Christians didn't want to read it because it's offensive. Who knew that title would offend Christians? I mean, I thought it was a great title. I would have loved it as a Christian, but it turns out it offends them. So Unravelation will be the new title with a whole bunch of updates, but it's going to be a little while before that comes out because it's still got to go to publisher and all kinds of things. But and it's still under editing. So in the meantime, check out How to Kill God the Easy Way. It's in the link below. Plus, it's just a cool title. Everybody should have that on their shelf. What do you say?
Oh, I like how organically the title came about, because, what you did was you inquired in an honest way, and you found out that, quitting smoking, because that was like, it was kind of based on that book, Quitting Smoking the Easy Way.
Yep.
Kind of look into something and kind of follow it, and you unravel it, so to speak. And you get to a point where you discover something new. Like, it wasn't really about smoking. It was about other problems you were having. And that's actually what happened with the medical science. We started looking back at like what, causes some of these, terrible health outcomes and the disparities that we see. And we found out it was childhood trauma. In some ways it's like a well, duh. I mean, that makes perfect sense now, but it wasn't as plainly obvious as it has become. And so, yeah, I like the discovery. I like finding new things and learning new things. And so, I never really had a problem with smoking, but I think if you did, it would be a great opportunity to kind of carefully examine all the reasons you really smoke and what it's really doing, and just slowing you down, centering you, getting you consolidated, getting you a little bit better perspective. And that's really what it's all about. That's really what we're doing here. So
right on. So before we jump into questions, I did promise that we were going to talk about circumcision, but because you have a whole really awesome video of it at Deepest Hell, you don't need to regurgitate that whole video. So go get that because it's really good. I promise you won't be disappointed. But what's that?
It's called Circumcision Basics.
Yep, Circumcision Basics. And he even draws and everything on the whiteboard, so you'll enjoy it. But can you just briefly talk about how circumcision affects children, especially as they age, and the traumatic effects that it has?
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, before you do that, I just want to say, one of the reasons why so many people, especially Christians, continue to circumcise their children is not because they think God still commands it today, but they think because God commanded in the old covenant, it was because of cleanliness things. And so they think, oh, well, if it was good for them, it must be good for us. Terrible mindset.
Terrible mindset. Yeah. It comes from originally, biblical origins. And then, the most common reason today that we circumcise boys is because of cultural reasons. So like that original biblical kind of misattribution or misunderstanding that has just kind of made its way into the culture, and now everybody kind of circumcisions and they kind of look at each other, like, why are we doing this? And the answer is just because everybody else is doing this. So there's no reason, and this is one of the take-home points that I try to emphasize when I'm talking about circumcision. There's nothing special about the tip of the penis. There's nothing at all unique or what's the word I'm looking for, like divine. There's nothing bestowed with special powers about the tip of the penis. It's just skin. It's part of any other part of your body, and it's not a birth defect. It's there. We need to learn how to care for it. We need to learn how to talk about it. There's no medical reason to recommend that all boys have a circumcision. If that was the case, we would just do it on everybody and it wouldn't be an option. But it's not. We all have to learn how to clean behind our ear, and we all have to learn about cleaning between our toes, and we have to learn about cleaning our genitalia. Girls do too. That skin basically goes around the outside of the head of the penis. And so if you're looking at a child who's got an uncircumcised penis, it just looks like one continuous, layer of skin. But if you were to kind of reflect it or kind of pull it back, what you'd find is that the head of the penis is underneath that area. It's kind of like a round kind of tip to the penis. So just by religious convention, I think, just like they decided purity culture was a thing, so was showing sacrifice by, ridding yourself of, the tip of your penis, the skin of the tip of your penis. We now cut that. There's different ways to kind of remove that skin. But in a circumcised penis, that skin is gone and you just see the shaft of the penis and then like the structure, which is the head of the penis. So that's really what a circumcision is. Does it cause trauma? Well, not really, because you don't really know that it's happening. Like when I just grew up, that's the way my penis always looked. I didn't know that it happened as a baby. But what can happen is it causes ambivalence. So like when you see other people with different appearance of their foreskin, some people, some men look like you, some men don't look like you, and you don't really understand what happened. Again, unless you talk to your child and you help them to understand how their body works and how their body appears and how to take care of their body, then it's going to cause, stress and anxiety and ambivalence and all that. So long story short, it's not a necessary procedure. There's the entire can of worms that has to do with consent. There are some people in some conservative states right now who are suggesting that kids under 18 shouldn't have certain gender affirming care or shouldn't have access to certain things that would be ratifying to their own ego, their sexuality and so forth, and yet we allow babies to have this operation, and it is a procedure. It's a fairly simple one. It's not without risk. There could be bleeding, there could be infection. We can't guarantee how it's going to look. So sometimes, it doesn't go as planned. But at the end of the day, like I said, the consent is like a real big deal. Like having somebody else, parents, make a medical decision that will permanently disfigure or permanently change cosmetically the appearance of somebody else is, I mean, it's unheard of in any other cases. I mean, we just don't see that happening in adults. Like no other adults make decisions for other adults about their body.
Yep. I appreciate you saying that because I happen to agree with you on that. I struggle that that's a decision parents can make for the kid. It's crazy to me. So a question to back that, and we are going to get to your questions, guys. Promise. Well, there's like actually only one anyway, so it shouldn't be a big deal. Um, but my question regarding this is, and I've heard various opinions on it, and really in a lot of ways, it seems like it can only be an opinion because um, I'm talking about sexual pleasure because you can't compare. It's not like I can put the foreskin on, try it, and pick it off and try it and be like, I think I like it this way better. So is there any evidence? Do we have any scientific data to demonstrate which way provides the better sexual pleasure? I've heard by those who kept it, they say they think it's way better. But again, how do they know? And how do I know? So what do you say? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I can honestly say that I've had parents in the process of deciding whether or not to circumcise newborns have justified sexual pleasure on both sides. So believe it or not, there's the possibility that if that sheath that is the foreskin or the prepuce, the skin that covers it, if that remains in place,
hey, you got to stop. Hey, Troy, hang on. You are breaking up so bad at like one of the. This is like the end of the movie, and they're running at each other, and then the movie just stops. Like you're breaking up, man. We gotta get you fixed here before we keep going. It might be me. I think it might be on my end actually.
Probably.
Hang on. Let me just. I am pretty certain that it is me. Let me see. Give me just a second. I want to make sure we don't have another TV on that's causing this issue. 1 second. All right. So it's nothing on my end. I'm just still having a low signal for some reason. Well, I don't think anybody wants to miss this answer because I definitely don't. All right. Right now, I think you look better. Let's give that another try. Back up like 30 seconds.
Okay. So I don't think there's any, like you said, like you suspected, I don't think there's any conclusive proof either way. I do think that there's a little bit different experience based on the, alteration of the anatomy. But, you could make an argument that, removal of the foreskin exposes certain nerves, which wouldn't have been, exposed in the other process. So maybe that gives you a little bit different sexual experience. So I don't know that there's any good answer. I don't think it should be I don't think it should be a topic or a subject that is really relevant when it comes to deciding on the circumcision. I mean, it's hard to, it's like you said, it's hard to compare both things. If the cover of the foreskin, if it doesn't retract, because normally it's supposed to retract, like when an erection occurs, that skin is supposed to kind of come over the head of the penis and become part of the skin of the enlarged shaft. Well, then, it doesn't at that point look much different from an uncircumcised penis, right? Because like in the erect state, I don't think there's any major change. Although that skin might be softer and might come up over the head of the penis. I don't know that it has anything to do with whether it's more pleasurable or not. It's really anybody's guess. I don't think it's necessarily relevant.
That's what I figured, but I appreciate your insight because I've been dying to know if somebody had actually an answer for that. So it's good to know that we don't. All right, so to our question panel, if anybody else has any, throw them in here because we are about to end. Couple of quick comments before we get to the question. Dragons and Genesis, Jason says, number one reason to be a Christian is to defeat vampires. Amen. Also, the most important comment of the night, Dr. Stoeber has the coolest haircut. Gotta agree with that.
Yeah. The brain vibes, they fill up the whole room. The brain vibes are extraordinary.
Yes, absolutely. Ryan, thank you for this comment. Make sure you hit the like. Totally agree. That helps out. So please, if you're here tonight, right now, just hit that like button. That's all you got to do. Just hit that like button to help spread the news. And to our question, which Ryan agrees is a good question. Here we go from Jason. For the doc, in your experience, Have you noticed a difference in types of trauma from different denominations?
Ooh, that's a good question.
It is.
I, not particularly in my experience, because most of the people that I encounter are Christians. Um, so I'm not sure if there's any discernible difference. But one thing that has, as an atheist, I can say one thing that they all have in common is that they're all unnecessary. I mean, every single denomination is just as foolish and made up and manufactured as every other one. So I can't say that I've delineated any particular denomination that does their trauma differently. But I would say that the ones that are more fundamentalist, and the ones that are more persecutory, and the ones that you know uh, focus on negative messages, I think it stands to reason that they would be more traumatic. But that's just kind of a personal observation. So good question.
Yeah, good question. Also, good answer. All right. Well, I think that about wraps things up
Oh,
for
I
this show. Go ahead.
just want to say thank you for your patience. As we were starting out, I had a technician kind of helping me set up the sound and setting up the fancy video feed and stuff. So we ended up going with the phone, and I think it actually worked out just fine. But I did want to say that we were a few minutes tardy starting things off, and I really appreciate everybody's patience. So
Sure. Well, no, thanks. And I appreciate everybody sticking around too. Thank you for your patience. But your studio looks great and you
okay,
look great. Now we just got to get the audio working and we'll be in great shape. So
no
maybe
problem.
next time we do a show together, which we should, because this was a lot of fun, we'll get the audio going and we'll be in great shape. And No Hero says, thank you for your time and commentary. I agree. Thank you, Dr. Stoeber, for being here. Troy, it was a true blessing, true honor to be in your presence and have this dialogue. So everybody, make sure, again, you comment, like, subscribe, do all the things you do here on Facebook. Would love it. Share this with somebody because this was a cool episode. And I think a lot of people need to see this. From your pediatric doctor and the Unraveler, peace and live free.